Hi, I'm Camille on William Street, and we are back talking about quilting ideas this week. So one of the questions that we get a lot of times is how do I quilt it? So as we're going throughout the year and making our bee blocks, I'm also sharing some different ideas and tips on ways that you can quilt that particular quilt block and some of the different shapes that are very common in a lot of the quilt blocks that we use. So this week we are working with our bee block number 6 for our quilt along, and you can see this one has, again, we're working with a lot of triangles and a lot of squares. So as you go through this and as you get ideas, keep in mind that you can put these shapes and these ideas in any block. Plus, I'm also going to share some ideas and kind of ways to kind of step outside the shape to create some different elements and to kind of brings in some other aspects of the design process depending on how kind of complex or simple you want to take it. So for the first design, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to mark off the center square or diamond, and I'm going to go ahead and put a fill in it. And again, I'm using pebbles, and I'm going to use pebbles in all of my designs for this one, but you don't have to use pebbles. If you have a different design you like, go ahead and use that. You can use any of the fills that you want for the center section. But then on the out one, I'm going to go ahead, and because I've got this yellow square, I'm going to treat it as one space. And this is really going to offset and contrast against the gray square in the middle. Give it some nice texture. Now, after we finish filling in these little sections, I'm going to move on to the light green squares. And I'm treating each one of these shapes as individual spaces. So I'm going to use a design that's going to fill in the light green squares. And then I'm going to do a completely different design in the dark green squares. And I'm just going to go ahead and put some straight lines on this one for now. Go ahead and fill in all of the different squares with these straight lines. But I'm going to go ahead and rotate it around. So I'm going to follow that same edge, outside edge on all of them, so that those squares, those straight lines kind of rotate around. For this design, I'm also going to go ahead and treat each of the shapes as an individual space. I'm going to put some straight lines in the outside again, but this time I'm following the vertical line. And so I'm going to keep all of them going vertical straight up and down. And then I'm going to alternate on the light green squares, and I'm going to go horizontal lines in these. After I fill those in, because those are simple, I'm going to put a little bit more into the center section. I'm going to use that same shape that I used in the green triangles, but put it in the gray. And then do a nice fill, put an echo and then a nice fill in the yellow to make that center area really pop out from the background element, because it's got a lot less density than that. Then those pebbles, it's going to really make it stand out and kind of become a foreground element and make those pebbles kind of become a dense background element to fill in the block. For this design, I'm going to go a little bit different. I'm going to treat the light green and the yellow as one area, and I'm going to fill it in with a feather fan motif. This is a little bit of a softer motif than some of the other ones I've done, so if you like something that's not a lot of straight lines or a lot of harsh, the feather is a great design to fill in those sections, and it can be fixed to shape, made to fit any shape you need. Then I do like that contrast of the straight with the curve, so I'm just going to go ahead and put some straight lines in the green sections again to change the direction from some of the previous ones. So you can see all the different ways you can put straight lines in those different triangles, following along all sorts of different areas and angles. Then on the inside, I'm going to go ahead and I decided to take my points from the inside and connect them, creating 4 more triangles, and then I'm just going to fill those in with some back and forth lines, and I would just probably connect at the corners. In this design, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to treat each of those squares, shapes as a square as opposed to individual shapes. I'm going to only look at the squares. So first I've gone ahead and outlined all of them with a soft arch, giving them kind of a circle shape, and then I'm going to fill in around the background. And if I was doing this as a whole quilt, I would leave the sashing out, because that would give a really cool effect. You'll see as we kind of create this together with the opposing lines in between and then the circles around the squares. And on the inside of those squares, I'm going to go ahead and put in an arch. I am going to do 2 arches just because you want to make sure that you've got your quilting distance right. But you can see that the effect that this would have over an overall quilt top in this block with this design. Now it's time to move on to the whole quilt, and I'm just going to use a lot of the same elements that we've used in some of the block designs to fill these in, but then I'm also going to go ahead and show you some of the different ways you can break down the background and quilt the negative space around the blocks. So first I went ahead and just put some straight lines in the light green areas, and I'm just putting some feathers, a little bit different than the one I did previously, but just a basic feather in the dark green sections of all of these blocks. So you can kind of see how some of those different designs and elements are going to fit in the different areas. So let me just finish filling in this last one really quick. I'm going to bounce around a little bit here as I kind of think about what I'm doing and come up with the different designs I want to do. But I first saw this square design in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that one out. And I know that I'm going to use that to fill in, for one of my shapes later. In the yellow section, just did the, diamond shapes. And I've just repeated that in the gray section as well. So it creates a fun shape going on there. Then in the background, I'm going to outline all of these blocks. And you can see by doing that, the squares that were the diamonds that were above and to the side of the block elements, those now become a background element, while the ones that I've outlined really become a foreground element. So it's going to look like those are sitting on top of whatever I put behind it. Because of that, I'm going to play with that, and I'm just going to go ahead and echo the background shapes, and then it could give me an opportunity to easily fill those in with something. For this design today, I'm just going to go ahead and put in some straight lines. What I am going to do though is I'm going to do the horizontal ones going this direction and put the vertical ones in the opposite direction. So it still adds some contrast and some interest there with the way that those lines are going to alternate around. And then I just need to fill in those big shapes with something. Again, go ahead and throw in some pebbles, and this design will be done. So the reason that I went with pebbles, again, you can do anything you want, but I like that they were a little bit smaller, so it's going to give me a closer, denser quilting than some of the spacing around it, so that those elements don't get lost amongst each other. They're still going to stand out. You're not going to have them butt up and basically become irrecognizable in the final design of the quilt. For this final design, again, I'm just going to go ahead and pick out a shape. And what I've decided to go with on this one is this triangle shape that you see here. It cuts into the corners of the blocks, not triangle, square. It cuts into the corners of the blocks, but still it's breaking down that area. So I'm not really treating the background separate from the blocks. I'm kind of quilting it all together. And then again, that leaves the diamonds here in between on the north, the tops and bottoms and the sides of those blocks. So I'm going to fill those in now. And this is now going to be the background element with the dense pebbles and the shape being cut off by that square. That's going to really read as a background element in the quilt. So just fill in a couple more of these. I just like to do just enough so you can see how the final quilt plan is all coming together. Now I can turn my attention to the blocks themselves. So I'm just going to put some straight lines in the green squares and then fill in with some echoes in the inside. I'm going to show you a neat trick that I'm going to use here if you don't know what else to quilt or are having trouble coming up with some ideas. I'm actually going to repeat that same design in this area with the white and the gray. It's basically the same shape. So I'm just going to do the same thing, and it's really going to kind of connect those areas together, add in some repetition, and it's easy to come up with designs because you've already figured it out. Then add some nice little arches around the pebbles, and again, putting them the same on the sides and on the top and bottom. So basically alternating, doing a checkerboard pattern for the quilting on top of this quilt. And then put my little arches in the outside triangles. So take what you've got here, sketch it out. You can always go to the blog post and there's going to be a picture. So you can print out the blank photo and you can sketch on that. I do a lot of doodling when I'm planning a quilt and trying to decide how to quilt it. So definitely go ahead and print those pictures out. There's going to be the block, and then you'll also see one that's got a full quilt layout as well. Sketch it out, come up with lots of different ideas, kind of find out what you like, and then stash these aside and save them. You can use them for inspiration on this project or other projects that you're working on as well. And we will be back in a couple weeks with the next block, so make sure that you hold on to these as we continue on. And if you have any questions, leave us a comment, subscribe to our channel, like the video, and you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook where we share photos of all the projects that we're working on and the things that we're doing. And we'll see you next time.